Welcome to night 10 to fall asleep fast. This is a quiet place where you don't need to focus, remember, or do anything at all. You can simply listen or let the sound fade gently into the background. If it feels right, you can softly like this video now or leave a calm comment sharing where you're listening from and what time it is. There's no need to rush. Everything here moves slowly. Tonight, we explore when animals went to court. Sleepy history of absurd trials. A calm and unhurried story from the past, told gently, without urgency and without expectation. You don't need to stay awake for it. You don't need to follow every detail. If you were here last night, welcome back. And if this is your first night, you can begin right here, exactly as you are. A new night will be waiting for you again tomorrow. But for now, allow your breathing to slow, your thoughts to drift, and let this story quietly carry you toward rest. The world moved differently then, not faster or slower in any measurable way, but with a steadiness that felt unquestioned. Days unfolded according to patterns that had been repeated so often they no longer felt learned, only lived. People woke, worked, rested, and slept within a rhythm that belonged as much to the land as to those who moved across it. Nothing needed to be explained because explanation itself had not yet become a habit. Custom shaped everything quietly. It lived in the way fields were divided, in the paths worn smooth by feet and hooves, in the order of tasks that followed one another from dawn to dusk. Rules were not always written, and when they were rarely consulted in the moment. They existed instead as memory, passed down through gestures and routines, reinforced by repetition rather than debate. What was done had usually been done before, and that familiarity brought a sense of calm. In this world, order did not announce itself. It did not arrive with declarations or sharp boundaries. It was present in the way disputes were settled without raised voices, in the expectation that each person knew their place without needing to defend it. Even disagreements carried a certain softness, shaped by the understanding that tomorrow would arrive much like today had, and the day after would do the same. Villages sat within their landscapes as though they had grown there naturally. Stone and wood aged together, roofs settling lower with each passing generation. Paths curved gently, following the easiest routes rather than the most direct ones. Nothing seemed designed to impress or dominate. Everything existed to be used, repaired, and used again. Time was not something to be conquered but something to move alongside. Within this setting, ideas of right and wrong were less abstract than they would later become. They were felt rather than analyzed, sensed through the balance of daily life. Actions mattered because they disturbed or preserved that balance. Consequences followed not as punishments in a modern sense, but as restorations, meant to return things to their expected place. The goal was not correction but continuity. Law, where it existed, did not stand apart from life. It did not hover above the village as an external force. Instead, it sat among the same structures that held grain and tools, that sheltered families and animals from the weather. Its presence was woven into the ordinary, rarely marked by ceremony, often carried out with the same gestures used in other parts of the day. There was comfort in this closeness. Because law was familiar, it was rarely feared. Because it was slow, it allowed time for reflection without demanding it. Decisions were made with an eye toward what had worked before, rather than what might work better. Innovation was not absent, but it arrived quietly, folded into tradition so gently that it barely felt new. Nature remained close at hand. The sounds of animals, the movement of wind through crops, the shifting of seasons all influenced how people understood order. Nothing existed in isolation. A bad harvest affected more than food. It altered expectations, softened judgments, and changed how disputes were viewed. Circumstances mattered, not as excuses but as context. This attentiveness to context shaped how responsibility was understood. Responsibility was not sharply defined, nor was it limited to intention alone. It extended outward, touching everything involved in an event. The idea that something could happen without fitting into a broader pattern was unfamiliar. Every action belonged somewhere, and when it did not, it needed to be gently guided back. Silence played an important role. Long pauses were not uncomfortable. Waiting was not seen as wasted time. When matters needed attention, they were given it slowly, with room for stillness. This stillness allowed thoughts to settle, emotions to pass, and decisions to emerge without force. Nothing needed to be rushed because there was nowhere else to be. Even authority carried a muted presence. Those who held positions of judgment did not separate themselves from the rest of the community. They lived among the same rhythms, shared the same concerns, and were subject to the same uncertainties. Their role was not to stand above, but to stand within, acting as caretakers of balance rather than enforcers of rules. Memory guided much of this world. Stories of past events were not preserved to warn or instruct in a formal sense, but to remind. They lingered in conversation, resurfacing when relevant, then fading again. These memories were not precise records, but living references, adjusted slightly each time they were recalled, shaped by the needs of the present. Because of this, the past never felt distant. It sat close, influencing decisions without demanding attention. What had happened before mattered, but not as a lesson to be studied. It mattered because it was familiar, because it had already found a place within the collective understanding of how things worked. The absence of urgency softened everything. Without the pressure to optimize or improve, people accepted what was sufficient. Enough was enough. This acceptance extended to systems of order as well. They did not aim for perfection, only for continuity. As long as life could continue without disruption, the system had done its work. As night approached, villages settled into themselves. Fires dimmed, voices lowered, and the world returned to a quieter version of its daytime self. Even disputes, if unresolved, were allowed to rest. Morning would come, and with it another opportunity to address what remained. Nothing demanded resolution before sleep. It was within this gentle framework that more specific practices took shape. Not abruptly and not all at once, but gradually, responding to the needs of particular places and moments. The broad sense of order began to gather itself into rooms and routines, into spaces where matters could be considered together, without hurry. These spaces did not yet stand apart in importance. They were simply places where the existing rhythm paused slightly, where attention could rest for a moment longer than usual. What happened there was not separate from the rest of life, but an extension of it, shaped by the same customs and expectations. And so, without ceremony, the world prepared itself for smaller stages. The wide landscape of customs slowly narrowed, not by force but by focus. Attention drifted from fields and paths toward benches and walls, toward familiar rooms where the quiet work of order continued, just as calmly as everything else. As attention drifted away from open fields and shared paths, it found its way into smaller spaces. These were not places set apart by grandeur or formality, but rooms that felt familiar even to those who entered them for the first time. Often they were part of buildings already known for other purposes, their significance shifting gently depending on the day and the need. Nothing announced their role. They simply became places where people gathered and waited. In quiet towns, courts did not dominate the landscape. They blended into it. A hall used for meetings could also serve as a place of judgment. A room near the center of the village, with sturdy walls and a few wooden benches, might take on that role when necessary. The space did not change much. Only the way it was occupied did. Candles were lit, doors were closed, and voices lowered almost instinctively. The scale of these courts matched the scale of the towns themselves. Nothing felt distant or abstract. Everyone knew the building. Many knew its history, or at least remembered other times they had stood within its walls for different reasons. This familiarity softened the experience. Even when matters of order were addressed, the setting remained grounded in everyday life. Time moved differently inside these rooms. Outside, the day continued with its routines, but within there was a pause. Not a dramatic halt, but a slight slowing, as though the air itself encouraged patience. People arrived without urgency and settled into their places without ceremony. There was no sense that anything extraordinary was about to occur. Light played an important role. Windows were often small, allowing only a muted glow to enter. Candlelight filled the rest, casting gentle shadows that shifted slowly as time passed. The flicker of flame did not distract, it steadied. It reminded those present that moments passed naturally, without need for intervention. The arrangement of the room was simple. Benches faced inward, encouraging attention without confrontation. There was no clear division between those who observed and those who were observed. Everyone shared the same space, breathing the same air, listening to the same quiet. This closeness made it difficult to forget that whatever occurred here belonged to the community as a whole. These courts did not operate on strict schedules. They opened when needed and rested when they were not. There was no sense of backlog or pressure to move quickly from one matter to the next. If something could wait, it did. If it could not, it was addressed with care rather than haste. Waiting was accepted as part of the process. Outside the court, the town remained calm. Animals moved through streets or rested near doorways. Children played quietly, their voices softened by distance and habit. The world did not pause for judgment, but neither did it rush past it. Everything existed alongside everything else, without sharp separation. Those who entered the court did so without spectacle. There were no announcements, no raised platforms, no visible signs of authority meant to inspire awe. Positions of responsibility were understood rather than displayed. The person who facilitated order did so with the same posture they used in other parts of their day. Objects within the room carried the marks of time. Wooden surfaces were worn smooth by repeated use. Stone floors bore faint impressions of countless footsteps. Nothing was pristine, but nothing was neglected. Each mark spoke of continuity rather than decay, of use rather than neglect. Sound behaved differently here as well. Voices remained low, not because silence was demanded, but because it felt appropriate. Even movements were restrained, as though the room itself encouraged gentleness. Chairs were shifted carefully, footsteps measured. The quiet was not enforced, it was shared. These spaces held memory without recording it. What happened within them was remembered through repetition and familiarity, not through written accounts. People recalled how similar matters had been handled before, not as precedents to be cited, but as reminders of what felt right. The past hovered lightly, offering guidance without instruction. Because of this, each gathering felt both familiar and unique. No two moments were exactly the same, yet none felt entirely new. This balance brought comfort. It allowed those present to remain present, rather than anticipating outcomes or fearing consequences. The towns themselves seemed to reflect this rhythm. Buildings leaned slightly, paths curved gently, and nothing appeared rigid or fixed. Change occurred slowly, almost imperceptibly. The court was part of this gradual movement, responding to shifts without drawing attention to them. As daylight faded and evening approached, these rooms took on a different quality. Shadows deepened and the outside world grew quieter. If matters remained unresolved, they were allowed to rest. There was no expectation that everything must be settled before nightfall. Rest held equal importance to resolution. In some towns, the court space was used so infrequently that it barely registered as distinct. It existed more as a possibility than a presence. Yet when it was needed, it was ready, shaped by custom rather than preparation. This readiness did not come from planning, but from familiarity. The absence of decoration reinforced the sense that the space belonged to everyone. There were no symbols to interpret, no imagery to distract. Attention rested naturally on the moment without being drawn toward anything specific. This neutrality allowed a wide range of matters to pass through without altering the character of the room. Even the air seemed to settle differently when the court was in use. Dust motes drifted slowly, visible in the candlelight, marking the passage of time without urgency. Breathing slowed. Thoughts followed suit. There was room for reflection without effort. What mattered most in these settings was not the outcome, but the act of gathering itself. The willingness to pause, to sit together, to acknowledge that something needed attention. This acknowledgement carried its own weight, often enough to restore balance without further action. Because these courts were small and familiar, nothing that occurred within them felt distant. Everything remained connected to daily life, to the routines that would resume once the gathering ended. This connection prevented matters from growing heavy. They remained part of the ongoing flow rather than standing apart from it. And within this flow, the presence of those who shared the town became more apparent. Not only people, but everything that moved through the streets and fields. Life here was not divided into categories as sharply as it might later become. Everything that belonged to the town belonged to its rhythm as well. As the quiet towns continued their steady existence, the courts remained ready but unobtrusive, waiting to be used without calling attention to themselves. The world did not revolve around them, but they held their place within it, steady and unremarkable. In this setting, attention began to widen again, not outward toward the landscape, but inward toward the many forms of life that shared these spaces. The boundaries between participants in daily routines were less defined than one might expect. Presence itself was often enough to imply belonging. And so, without notice or emphasis, the focus gently shifted toward those who moved alongside people every day, sharing their paths and routines, woven so tightly into daily life that their presence hardly needed to be named. Beyond the walls of the small courts, Life continued with a quiet, persistent rhythm that encompassed more than human presence alone. Animals moved among people with a familiarity that required no attention, yet their influence was subtly woven into the fabric of daily life. Chickens clucked in the yards, rustling through dry leaves and scattered straw, while dogs rested at doorways, eyes half closed, ears twitching at distant sounds. Horses shifted their weight in stables, the soft scrape of hooves on stone or dirt a gentle accompaniment to the town's heartbeat. Their presence was constant and unremarkable, yet it shaped the way humans moved, spoke, and lingered. The town itself seemed constructed to accommodate all these lives simultaneously. Paths were worn by both hoof and foot, doorways were wide enough to allow the passage of carts as well as people, and barns rested alongside homes without distinction. The line between human space and animal space was permeable, undefined, flowing naturally as part of the rhythm of the day. Even in moments of stillness, the awareness of their proximity lingered, a subtle pressure that directed behavior without force. Animals were known and understood individually. The black goat that wandered near the bakery was recognized by its gait, the sound of its soft bleating. A pair of geese moved in measured arcs around the central square, their wings brushing the air with faint noise. Cats slinked silently along walls, finding warmth in the sun-warmed stones or the thin rays of candlelight that reached the edge of the evening. Each animal was both ordinary and essential, contributing to a shared sense of continuity that tied present and past together. Sounds of animal life formed a backdrop to human routines. The low rumble of a cow in its stall, the distant bray of a donkey, the scratching of chickens in the dirt, all were part of a larger composition, unnoticed yet deeply familiar. Conversations and work moved in gentle counterpoint to these sounds, neither overpowering nor being overpowered, creating a harmony that was never forced. It was the quiet chorus of coexistence. This coexistence extended beyond mere proximity. Humans and animals alike participated in a shared rhythm of care. Water needed to be drawn, feed distributed, shelter maintained. These tasks were small, repetitive, and essential, performed with an attention that bordered on automatic, yet carried the weight of responsibility. Each action affected both human and non-human lives, and both were acknowledged through simple observation and habitual adjustment. If a gate was left slightly open, a goat might wander and be guided back without fuss. If a horse shifted uneasily, a handler moved slowly to offer reassurance. Every gesture was measured, unhurried, part of a gentle negotiation that maintained balance. Movement was also dictated by habit. Animals knew where they were permitted to go, and humans often anticipated that movement without thought. The baker swept the floor, pausing for a moment to shoo away the chickens, knowing they would return once she stepped back. A cat leapt onto the windowsill, settling into its accustomed position as dusk deepened. A dog followed its owner with a soft, unobtrusive presence, a silent companion rather than a source of command or expectation. In these exchanges, no one hurried and no one lingered longer than necessary. Time itself seemed to adopt the patience inherent in the shared patterns. The environment shaped interaction as much as habit. Narrow streets encouraged careful pacing. Open courtyards invited wandering and grazing. Weather subtly influenced movement. A sudden shower sent animals and people alike seeking shelter beneath eaves, overhangs, and within barns. The sound of rain pattering on thatch and stone created a soft, continuous rhythm that connected all who occupied the space, reinforcing a sense of unity. Even the wind contributed, stirring leaves and feathers in ways that reminded the town of the delicate balance of its inhabitants. Observation was natural and unremarkable. A person crossing the square might glance at the flock of geese, noticing their formation and the pattern of their steps. A child might watch a cat chase a shadow along the wall. Each moment was fleeting yet grounding, a small recognition of shared presence that required no commentary, no evaluation, no narrative. It was enough to see, to acknowledge, and then to move on. At dusk, the interactions grew softer. Shadows lengthened, the air cooled, and the animals settled into places that had become familiar over months and years. The chickens returned to roosting spots, the goats rested near walls, the dogs curled beside hearths. The stillness that descended over the town was not empty but populated, filled with the quiet weight of life unfolding in patterns that had long been established. It was a time for observation rather than intervention, for noticing rather than acting. This patterning extended to the interplay between human duties and animal presence. Tasks were not performed in isolation. As a baker prepared bread, a dog sat quietly near the oven, the horse shifted in its stall, and a cat padded along the edges of the room. Each action occurred with awareness, but awareness itself did not demand excitement or urgency. It was a matter of shared rhythm, a gentle weaving of attention that spanned species and generations alike. Even in moments of absolute stillness, the awareness of animals lingered. Their breathing, the faint scrape of a claw or hoof, the soft shuffle as they adjusted their weight, all these sounds contributed to a feeling of continuity, a sense that life extended beyond any individual. The town was alive not only through its human inhabitants but through the subtle, constant presence of creatures who had always been part of it. Their lives were integrated seamlessly into the human perception of time, influencing thought and movement without ever needing to be consciously recognized. The acceptance of their role in daily life influenced more than behavior. It shaped the way people perceived responsibility. When actions affected animals, even in minor ways, there was recognition without fuss. A gate left open, a path blocked, or a moment of inattention was corrected gently, quietly, as though the world itself prompted understanding. No lesson was taught, no admonition issued. The correction emerged naturally from observation and habit. In this sense, responsibility was shared, extending beyond what was solely human, and flowing outward to include all who moved within the same spaces. By nightfall, the interplay of human and animal activity had largely quieted, yet the sense of coexistence remained. Shadows stretched over doorways and courtyards, outlining forms both human and non-human, melding them into the soft tapestry of the evening. The faint clatter of hooves on cobblestones, the distant call of birds settling for the night, and the whisper of wind through the town created a layered calm, a meditation in sound and presence. No action was required, no conclusion expected. The town simply existed as it always had, a seamless blend of lives unfolding together. And within this continuity, awareness began to settle even further. The presence of animals was felt as much in their absence as in their movement, as spaces emptied and lights dimmed. Attention drifted gently, carrying a sense of shared care and mutual dependence that extended beyond immediate observation. The rhythm of the town included every living being, and that rhythm was quiet, constant, and unhurried. Here the line between human and non-human blurred softly. Each influenced the other, each responded to the other, and the world adjusted imperceptibly to accommodate both. This delicate equilibrium required no effort, demanded no notice, and yet it persisted, forming the foundation for the understanding of responsibility that would quietly shape later acts. It was an ordinary, peaceful coexistence, unfolding naturally without expectation and without ceremony. The shared rhythm of the town extended beyond the simple coexistence of human and animal. Every movement, every small choice, carried a weight that was acknowledged not with alarm, but with a quiet attentiveness. Gates left slightly ajar, stray feathers along the path, a misaligned bucket of feed. Each circumstance was noted, adjusted, or allowed to settle naturally depending on the moment. Responsibility flowed gently, indistinctly, encompassing all who moved through the village, seen and unseen, human and otherwise. Nothing demanded immediate correction, yet the sense of care persisted, a soft pressure that guided action without command. People moved with a subtle consciousness of their place within this interconnected life. Each footstep considered the small tremor it might cause in a loose stone, a resting animal, or a hanging rope. Tasks were performed with patience, repetition lending the hands a quiet expertise. The act of sweeping a yard, carrying water, or distributing feed was not merely functional. It was an extension of a broader attentiveness to the environment and its occupants. Mistakes were rare not because of fear, but because observation had become a gentle habit. Animals, in turn, responded to this attentiveness. A horse shifted to avoid a passerby, not out of training or command, but from long familiarity with the rhythms of those who shared its space. A cat adjusted its path, a dog paused mid-step, each movement a subtle acknowledgement of shared presence. This was not obedience in the sense of control, but an unspoken coordination, a quiet understanding that each act rippled through the larger pattern of life. This pattern extended to the objects and spaces themselves. Doors were opened and closed with care, windows were left ajar only where appropriate, and paths were kept clear not through strict rules but through awareness of the flow of life. Even small mistakes were absorbed gently, corrected when convenient, or allowed to exist until the moment naturally invited adjustment. The world had room to breathe, to stretch, to balance itself slowly without hurry. Morning and evening carried their own rituals of attentiveness. As dawn light touched rooftops and dust motes shimmered in the beams, people moved deliberately through their tasks. A farmer ensured that animals were fed before tending to fields, recognizing that neglect would disturb the subtle order. The hum of daily chores was accompanied by the quiet shuffle of paws and hooves, a rhythm that needed no conductor, only participation. Each act was small, yet part of a larger choreography that sustained the harmony of the village. Attention flowed equally across boundaries. No distinction was made between the needs of a human or those of an animal, between the care of a tool or the maintenance of a path. All were part of a continuous whole. The balance was not enforced through judgment but through recognition, an understanding that every small action contributed to the life of the place. Nothing was weighed in a ledger or marked in a book. It simply existed in the memory of those who observed and participated. Even errors were absorbed as part of this quiet system. A spilled pail of water did not provoke anger. It prompted a gentle correction, a mindful step to restore balance. If a goat wandered too close to the hearth, it was guided back without fuss, the rhythm of the day accommodating its curiosity. Responsibility was woven into the fabric of life so subtly that those within it rarely noted its presence. Yet its absence would have been immediately obvious, a disruption felt rather than measured. The village itself seemed to breathe with this awareness. Walls, roofs, and paths all responded to the movement of its inhabitants. A door creaked with the pressure of a hinge that had grown accustomed to decades of use. The stone underfoot shifted slightly with the tread of repeated steps. The wind carried the faint rustle of leaves across the square, reminding everyone of the continual subtle changes that shaped each day. All of these elements worked together to create an environment in which responsibility was an extension of observation rather than obligation. Time moved with a gentle elasticity. Tasks could be paused, reconsidered, or shared without consequence. There was a patience embedded in every action, a slow unfolding that allowed for adaptation and correction. The presence of others, both human and animal, encouraged attentiveness, yet did so without pressure. Mistakes, when they occurred, were minor, part of the natural flow rather than interruptions to it. Even in moments of stillness, responsibility remained. Sitting quietly on a bench, watching the light fade through narrow windows, one could perceive the balance of the village. The absence of movement was itself informative. A horse resting calmly, a dog curled by a doorway, a cat perched silently on the edge of a roof. Each presence affirmed the shared attention that had guided the day, reinforcing the unspoken understanding that all actions, no matter how small, mattered gently to the whole. At dusk, the subtleties of care became more pronounced. Candles flickered, shadows stretched along the streets, and the quieter routines allowed the participants to notice what had gone unnoticed before. A stray feather was gently gathered, a misplaced tool returned to its resting place, and the day's movements were absorbed into the memory of the village without comment. No instruction was needed. The rhythm of responsibility flowed naturally. The concept of oversight was as soft as the light. Those who might have seemed in positions of authority moved quietly, offering guidance only when necessary, often without verbal acknowledgement. Their presence was an extension of the environment, part of a network of subtle observation that reinforced the ongoing balance. Actions were corrected gently, never enforced with insistence. The system itself maintained a slow, steady coherence, one that both humans and animals respected instinctively. Responsibility in this sense was cumulative and invisible. It did not announce itself, nor did it demand recognition. It emerged from the repeated acknowledgement of small needs and the unobtrusive restoration of order. Every person, every creature, every object contributed to the continuity of life, and in return was supported by it. There was no rush to achieve, no competition to prevail. There was only presence and awareness, measured and tender. Night deepened, and the village settled into the muted tones of evening. The care taken during the day left traces in the stillness. A path swept clean, animals resting in familiar places, doors closed with a sense of quiet propriety. The soft glow of candlelight illuminated each space with gentle assurance. Responsibility continued, not through action, but as a lingering awareness that pervaded every corner, every shadow, every breath of the night. This shared attentiveness, extending across species and generations, created a sense of wholeness that was both imperceptible and essential. Nothing required dramatic acknowledgement, it existed because it had always existed. And in this gentle continuity, the town allowed itself to breathe, to exist, and to prepare for whatever moments would quietly unfold in the next day, carrying with it the unspoken, unhurried weight of shared care. Within this understanding, the stage was set for smaller, unusual patterns to emerge, the subtle irregularities that drew attention not because they were disruptive, but because they fit gently into the quiet rhythm of daily life. These patterns, almost imperceptible, hinted at the soft humor and peculiarities that would eventually find their place in the routines and customs of the village. The quiet attentiveness of the village made space for moments that, to an outside eye, might appear curious or unusual, yet here they blended seamlessly into the rhythm of life. In a modest court tucked near the center of the town, animals were not only present in their ordinary roles, grazing or resting nearby, but occasionally found themselves at the center of the day's attention. There was no alarm, no extraordinary preparation, only the gentle unfolding of routine, wherein the creature's presence was acknowledged with measured patience and subtle observation. A goat might wander slowly between the benches, pausing to sniff at corners or nibble at straw that had scattered in the morning. Chickens clucked softly, threading through legs and along the edges of the room. Occasionally, a dog padded across the floor, sniffing the air and settling in the shadow of a post. Their movements were neither hurried nor restrained. They were simply part of the ongoing scene, a living addition to the quiet architecture of daily practice. Their presence did not require ceremony, yet it was recognized, and in that recognition lay a soft form of order. Within this space, the line between ordinary duties and the peculiar became almost invisible. When the court gathered, humans occupied their usual places, seated or standing with the careful attention learned through years of observing the world's gentle pulse. The animals moved among them as they always had, yet in this context their actions were observed differently, imbued with a significance that was more about the continuity of life than any notion of judgment. A cat crossing the floor might pause as if considering its surroundings, a goat might tilt its head curiously at the arrangement of benches, and a dog might lift an ear, sensing something beyond its comprehension yet contained entirely within the calm of the room. Time in this chamber unfolded slowly, each movement and breath measured without thought of hurry. The creature's presence added layers to the ambient rhythm, a soft scrape of hooves on stone, the quiet rustle of feathers, the gentle exhalation of a dog lying in a corner. These sounds mingled with the low murmur of human voices, creating a soundscape that was neither lively nor silent, but somewhere in between, balanced and unremarkable in its constancy. It was a harmony that required no attention to understand, only the simple act of being present. Light filtered in through narrow windows, casting pale reflections on the walls and floor. Candle flames flickered in gentle synchrony, their warmth touching the animals and humans alike. Shadows shifted imperceptibly as the day waned, elongating and blending the forms of men, women, and creatures into a single quiet composition. Nothing stood out as strange, the unusual was accepted as ordinary, the curious recognized as part of the world's gentle choreography. Observers, when they appeared, moved with soft awareness. Their eyes traced the steps of animals without intruding, noting without labeling, witnessing without expectation. Each gesture, whether human or non-human, was absorbed into the continuity of the day, neither celebrated nor criticized. The animals did not act with purpose beyond their nature, yet within the shared space their presence influenced the tempo of all movement, shaping the cadence of attention, however subtly. Sometimes a rooster crowed softly, a sound that echoed faintly through the quiet room, marking the passage of time without hurry or insistence. A goat might scratch against a post, or a dog might shift slightly, adjusting its position with a faint sigh. All actions were minor, ordinary, and yet they punctuated the experience, reminding those present that life in all its forms proceeded with gentle persistence. The absurdity that might be seen in isolation was here part of a seamless flow, a muted humor that never demanded acknowledgement, only quiet noticing. This sense of inclusion extended to the placement of objects as well. Wooden benches, low tables, and small tokens of daily life were arranged in such a way that animals could navigate freely, their paths unobstructed, their presence neither ignored nor elevated. Straw scattered along the edges of the room, footprints in dust and dirt, a stray leaf caught near a window, Each element contributed to a tapestry of subtle interactions, forming a scene that was complete in its imperfection. The villagers' approach to these peculiar assemblies was measured. They did not act with performance in mind, nor did they enforce rules beyond the soft demands of shared space. If a goat strayed into a circle of attention, it was guided with gentle hands, a quiet redirection rather than an assertion of control. If a dog shifted position, it was allowed the comfort of choice. Observers adjusted their own movements accordingly, creating a dance of mutual accommodation that never required language to negotiate. Through all of this, the room maintained a constant hum of life. Every small detail, the shuffle of straw, the brushing of an animal against a wall, the tilt of a head, the inhalation and exhalation of beings both human and otherwise, formed a continuous thread of awareness. This was a theater without performance, a stage without audience, a place where the natural order included elements that might appear curious only when removed from context. In the gentle continuity of the day, nothing seemed misplaced. The slow unfolding of these gatherings carried with it a meditative quality. Observers found themselves noticing the textures of stone, the warmth of sunlight lingering through narrow panes, the subtle movements of shadow along the walls. Animals navigated the space with ease, their instincts guiding them in concert with the tacit understanding of humans. Each presence reinforced the unspoken understanding that all were part of a shared environment, each contributing to the continuity of the moment without seeking acknowledgement. Evening stretched, the dimming light softening forms, blending movement and stillness. A dog's tail swept lazily across the floor, a goat paused mid-step, and a cat finally settled upon a windowsill. The humans, seated quietly or leaning against familiar posts, allowed their attention to drift alongside these subtle rhythms. Nothing demanded action, nothing required focus. It was enough to simply inhabit the space, to follow the ebb and flow of presence, and to feel the day's peculiar yet tranquil harmony settle around them. And so the court of beasts continued, neither chaotic nor orderly in the conventional sense, but serene in its own peculiar logic. It was a world contained within walls yet expansive in its gentle reach, where curiosity and routine intertwined, and where the extraordinary blended seamlessly into the fabric of quiet existence. The scene lingered, unhurried and patient, awaiting the subtle transitions that would later lead attention to the patterns of ritual and custom that had shaped these gatherings for generations. Within the quiet chambers of the village's courts, a subtle choreography unfolded, invisible to those who might rush through life, yet evident to those attuned to its gentle rhythm. The animals, already accustomed to wandering among benches, posts, and scattered straw, became participants in a series of movements and gestures that were both ordinary and ceremonious. Every step, every glance, every shift of weight contributed to a silent performance that carried meaning without sound, a ritual observed more in habit than in instruction. The humans, too, moved with an unspoken understanding, each motion deliberate yet relaxed, echoing the rhythm established over countless mornings and evenings. A hand reached toward a gate, adjusting it just enough to allow a goat passage. A low bench was nudged slightly to provide clearer sight lines, not for scrutiny, but to facilitate the quiet flow of observation. Candles, long since lit, flickered across worn wooden surfaces, casting soft shadows that elongated and mingled with those of the creatures, forming a tapestry of light and form that seemed alive, yet entirely still. The air was imbued with an unhurried expectancy, a calm awareness that filled the space without pressing upon it. Each individual, whether human or non-human, understood their place within this rhythm, their movements guided by gentle intuition rather than instruction. A dog might pause to sit attentively, its posture reflecting the gravity of the space without agitation. A cat, silent as ever, observed from a windowsill, tail swaying ever so slightly in acknowledgement of the patterns beneath it. Even the straw underfoot seemed to yield to each step, softening motion and sound, weaving together the many presences into a continuous, flowing scene. These rituals were quiet, almost imperceptible to an outsider, yet they shaped the tempo of the court's daily life. The placement of objects, the alignment of benches, the careful spacing of participants, each detail was attended to with a slow, meditative precision. A fallen leaf might be brushed aside, a stray feather carefully lifted, each act performed without urgency, each gesture absorbed into the larger, unbroken pattern. Nothing demanded attention. Everything was acknowledged in passing, in soft awareness. Light, shifting gradually with the movement of day toward evening, played upon these subtle arrangements. Sunbeams pierced narrow windows, illuminating dust motes and the faint textures of walls and furniture. The glow highlighted the gentle contours of a goat's back, the soft fur of a dog, the poised stillness of a cat. Shadows elongated, folding one form into another, and in this interplay, the quiet rituals became almost a dance of mutual recognition. No sound marked the steps, no words were exchanged, yet understanding flowed seamlessly from presence to presence. Time itself seemed to slow within these spaces. Tasks that might elsewhere require deliberation were performed instinctively, with the awareness that each gesture mattered, even if only softly, in the continuation of the day's rhythm. Hands adjusted the position of an animal, a candle was tilted to reduce glare, a broom swept gently along the edges of the floor. Each act was measured, deliberate, yet utterly relaxed, a reflection of the slow, continuous cadence that bound the court together. The animals, ever sensitive to this rhythm, mirrored it in their own way. A goat's ears flicked toward movement, a dog shifted position with barely a sound, a cat's eyes tracked the motion of a passing figure. These were small, delicate acknowledgments, subtle responses that harmonized with human motion rather than disrupting it. No training was required. Habituation had suffused the space with calm understanding, and the creatures moved within it as naturally as the light through the windows or the soft flutter of a curtain in the breeze. Occasionally, a minor adjustment would be made, hardly noticed in the broader flow of the day. A chair was nudged, a path cleared, a gate secured. Each of these gestures was integrated into the ritual, neither emphasized nor dismissed, existing simply as part of the continuum of attention that extended through every corner of the room. Even these minor acts contributed to a sense of quiet order, a soft acknowledgement of the interconnectedness of all present. Sounds, when they arose, were equally subdued. A faint rustle of straw, the soft patting of paws, the distant sigh of a resting horse, these blended into the gentle murmur of human movement and the subtle hum of the building itself. Silence was never absolute. It was a living, breathing quiet, composed of many small layers that together formed a serene backdrop for observation and participation. The sense of ritual was embedded not in noise or spectacle, but in the attentive, calm engagement of all present. Evenings deepened, and the ambient light dimmed into gentle hues of shadow and candle glow. The animals settled into positions that had long been familiar. A dog curled beside a low post, a goat rested near a wall, a cat perched high where it could observe without interference. Humans leaned slightly, adjusted their posture, and allowed their gaze to drift along the room's contours, following the same slow, deliberate pattern that had guided their day. There was no urgency, no expectation beyond presence. The ritual existed as a framework for shared calm, a silent acknowledgement of continuity. Within this quiet, each participant, human and animal alike, seemed to occupy an understanding of their role that transcended instruction. The rituals, repeated in their simplicity, provided structure without imposing it, order without constraint. Motion and stillness alternated naturally, and in this alternation, the court maintained its serene character. The observer might notice a feather shifting in a gentle breeze, a paw brushing lightly against a stone floor, a candle flame flickering in subtle response to movement. All of these details formed part of a cohesive whole, unremarkable in isolation but deeply resonant when perceived as a continuum. As the day's proceedings came toward a gentle pause, there was a sense of completion that was neither marked nor announced. Movements slowed, postures softened, and the shared awareness of those within the room extended outward, mingling with the fading light and the settling quiet of the surrounding village. The rituals and silence had left their imprint, subtle and pervasive, a quiet architecture of care and attention that would carry forward into the evening and beyond. And in this soft interlude, the mind could linger, drifting alongside the patterns of presence, the interplay of attention, and the gentle unfolding of a day measured not by urgency, but by the rhythm of calm and careful observance. From this serene foundation, attention could begin to notice the individual incidents and small peculiarities that would later be observed, laying the groundwork for the stories of particular cases and moments that formed the next layer of the village's quiet life. In the calm light of the late afternoon, the court continued its gentle unfolding, and among the usual rhythms, certain moments quietly distinguished themselves. These were the small, notable trials, the subtle instances that drew attention without hurry or excitement. A goat, for example, had wandered near a pile of stored grain, its movements careful yet unmistakably deliberate. Observers noted the direction of each step, the slight tilt of the head, the delicate balance of curiosity and instinct, and recorded it not in judgment but in a quiet awareness of interaction. The act was observed, acknowledged, and then absorbed into the ongoing flow of life. Nearby, a dog paused mid-step beside a bench, nose lowered toward a shadow that moved with the flicker of candlelight. Its ears flicked gently, tail swaying in a rhythm that seemed to answer an unspoken pattern. Humans adjusted their posture, leaning just slightly to maintain sight, their motions slow and unobtrusive. Every gesture was a form of quiet documentation, a gentle noticing rather than interrogation. The room seemed to hold its breath, though no one commanded stillness. It was an organic, mutual attentiveness that needed no words. A cat, with its usual discretion, traversed the room along ledges and windowsills, its eyes glimmering faintly in the waning light. Its movements intersected with the other participants in a dance of natural rhythm, each crossing noted softly, each presence absorbed seamlessly into the continuity of the court. No action demanded response. No presence altered the environment beyond a subtle acknowledgement of being. The observers, human and otherwise, seemed to understand instinctively that these minor, almost whimsical events were as much a part of the day's structure as feeding, sweeping, or lighting candles. Sometimes a rooster would crow quietly, a gentle reminder of the passage of time, and the attention would shift ever so slightly. The goat might pause, ears flicking, while the dog repositioned itself, tail sweeping softly across the floor. Humans traced these movements with the calm focus of habit, recognizing them not as interruptions but as natural points of note. Even in the smallest gestures, the brushing of a feather, the repositioning of a straw, the subtle tilt of a bench, the pattern of observation continued, forming an unspoken archive of quiet behavior. Each of these trials was framed by the same calm awareness that guided the broader rituals. A spilled pail of water was met with soft intervention, hands moving to restore order without ceremony, without urgency. If a chicken wandered into the center of the room, it was redirected with gentle patience, as though its curiosity were a valued contributor rather than a disturbance. In these moments, the extraordinary was simply ordinary, and the observer's attention flowed around and through it without judgment, without commentary. The lighting shifted imperceptibly, shadows stretching along walls and floors, blending movements into soft, indistinct forms. A human might adjust a candle to illuminate the subtle pattern of straw, while a dog's paw brushed against a stone tile. Each instance of observation, no matter how slight, added to the sense of collective attention that permeated the space. Even when no one moved, the memory of previous actions and the anticipation of small interactions maintained a thread of calm awareness throughout the court. The notable trials were rarely dramatic. Their impact was quiet, measured, and almost poetic in its simplicity. A goat's cautious approach to a trough, a dog's attentive pause beside a post, the light shimmer on a cat's fur as it crossed the room, these were moments of significance not because they demanded action, but because they existed within the continuous rhythm of life. Humans recorded these events in memory alone, noting patterns and peculiarities with a soft diligence that carried neither judgment nor excitement, only acknowledgement. Subtle patterns emerged from repeated observation. A goat always paused for a fraction of a second at the same corner, a dog shifted its gaze in anticipation of a shadow, a cat lingered longer on a particular ledge when sunlight fell just so. These repetitions were recognized but never emphasized. They became part of the village's quiet consciousness, a framework for understanding that was as much about coexistence as it was about attention. The court became a repository not of rules or punishments, but of observation and gentle documentation, a space where moments were noted and allowed to exist within the natural order. Even the smallest interactions carried a sense of weight, though the weight was soft, almost imperceptible. A human hand resting lightly on a goat's back, a flick of a tail indicating curiosity or caution, a subtle shift of a bench to accommodate movement. Each gesture was part of the ongoing narrative. There was no urgency, no demand for response, only the acknowledgement that every presence, every action contributed to the quiet life of the room. In this way, the notable trials were gentle episodes, existing fully in the present without anticipation or conclusion. As the day moved toward evening, light softened further, and the textures of the room took on warmer, deeper tones. Candles flickered against walls, shadows mingled and stretched across the floor, and the animals adjusted their positions with a quiet grace. Humans allowed their attention to drift along the contours of these interactions, observing with patience and care. Every minor detail, from the glint of a brass hinge to the brush of a tail against wood, became a note in the ongoing meditation of shared presence. Through these gentle observations, the rhythm of the court was preserved. The room held its calm, and each participant, human or animal, contributed to a continuous, silent understanding. No gesture was wasted, no movement went unnoticed. The unusual or peculiar was absorbed seamlessly into the environment, becoming part of the ongoing story that existed beyond words or recording. Attention itself became an act of care, performed without insistence, without urgency, yet deeply influential in maintaining the quiet order. And in this soft, unbroken attention, the notable trials became a study not of outcomes but of presence. Each subtle action, each measured pause, each gentle shift contributed to a fabric of understanding that extended beyond the room. It was a world observed, not judged, a narrative formed through patience and quiet attention, unfolding naturally in the muted light of late afternoon and early evening. In this rhythm, curiosity and care intertwined, setting the stage for the broader perspective of the village itself, as the next chapter of quiet observation slowly emerged. The village itself seemed to breathe alongside the slow rhythm of the court. Streets, cobbled and winding, lay quiet in the afternoon sun, while the soft shuffle of feet and the occasional call of a distant bird marked the passage of hours without urgency. Windows, framed with the gentle patina of age, reflected light unevenly across plastered walls, and the flicker of a candle in a far-off room hinted at routines moving unseen. There was no rush in the village. Each home, each stable, each open square existed as a note in a larger composition, a chorus of quiet presences that filled the spaces between the court's walls. Children, if they wandered near the edges of the central square, moved in deliberate, careful steps. They paused to watch a goat nibbling at stray leaves, or the slow passage of a dog along a worn path. Their curiosity was gentle, measured, without excitement or urgency. Even in their quiet observation, the flow of daily life continued unbroken, as though each small interaction were a soft accompaniment to the larger rhythm of the community. The village had learned to fold the presence of animals and humans into the same gentle cadence, and the coexistence seemed effortless, yet deeply attentive. Shadows lengthened as sunlight shifted through narrow alleys and open courtyards, tracing the contours of walls and the edges of thatched roofs. Doors half opened to allow air and light, framed glimpses of interiors where family life moved quietly. A woman adjusted linens on a windowsill, a man arranged a bundle of herbs in a wicker basket, a child paused to watch a cat crossing a sunlit threshold. Each gesture was small, deliberate, and absorbed into the unhurried life of the village. Time flowed not in measured hours but in the unfolding of presence, each action nested within another, each observation quietly noted without interruption. The animals themselves were part of this broader consciousness. Horses stood patiently in stables, tails flicking to chase away the occasional fly, ears attuned to distant sounds. Chickens wandered freely along stone paths, pausing to peck at stray grains, yet moving with an awareness of the spaces humans occupied. Even the goats, previously observed in the court, now traced familiar routes, blending their curiosity with the rhythms of the village. Each presence reinforced a pattern of gentle coexistence, the village itself becoming a living frame for both observation and care. Along the edges of fields and gardens, wind stirred the tops of grain and the leaves of orchard trees, carrying a soft murmur that merged with the subtle sounds of domestic life. Laundry hung along lines stretched between houses, swaying slowly in the warm afternoon air, and the muted clink of tools against stone or wood marked minor tasks performed with quiet diligence. Every element of the village, living, moving, resting, contributed to the unbroken, meditative pace of life, as though each action existed only in acknowledgement of what had come before and what would follow, without insistence or demand. The court's activities, although more central and structured, mirrored this broader rhythm. News of a minor trial might travel along a street, whispered in passing or observed in posture and glance, but it did not disturb the flow of village life. People moved with awareness, adjusting their presence without haste, folding events into their own quiet routines. A glimpse of a goat's careful movement or the gentle sway of a dog's tail became a soft punctuation in the ongoing narrative, neither commanding attention nor requiring response. It was as if the village had learned to recognize significance without allowing it to intrude upon the calm of the day. Small details punctuated the awareness of those moving through the village. A cat paused to clean itself in a shaded corner, a horse shifted weight, flicking its ears toward distant noises, and the wind stirred loose leaves along narrow alleyways. Humans, moving through these spaces, noted these gestures with a soft attentiveness, their awareness weaving around the minor phenomena without urgency. Even the placement of baskets, benches, and tools was done with an eye toward continuity, maintaining an understated order that reinforced the unhurried nature of daily life. Windowsills framed small tableaus of domestic stillness. A chair leaned against a wall, a stack of freshly cut wood rested nearby, and a narrow street curved into the distance, fading into the muted glow of evening. The court, though situated within this environment, did not disrupt its flow. Rather, it participated in the village's rhythm, a quiet focal point in a community accustomed to coexistence. The animal's presence, once observed in isolation, now merged seamlessly with human activity, the boundaries between observer and observed softening into mutual understanding. As the day deepened, light shifted toward warmer, more golden hues, the shadows stretching to embrace the textures of stone and plaster, wood and straw. The village seemed to exhale slowly, its collective attention softening while remaining aware. The court and its participants were folded into this expansive, meditative space, each movement and gesture absorbed into the continuum of the village's awareness. Small actions, the gentle brushing of a horse's coat, the careful placement of a basket, the measured steps of a goat along a familiar path, contributed to an overall harmony that neither demanded attention nor sought to impress. Evening brought with it a subtle quietude, the kind that carries a village gently toward night. The distant chiming of a bell, a dog's slow stretch and sigh, the faint swish of leaves in a soft breeze, each sound existed within the shared understanding of rhythm and presence. Humans paused to notice these details without comment. The animals aligned their own motions with the gentle unfolding of daily practice. The village itself became a participant in observation, a living companion to the silent ceremonies and minor trials that had quietly marked the day. From this broader perspective, the court's activity was seen as one element in the flowing life of the village, each minor trial, every ritualized movement, every attentive gesture contributing to a landscape of calm coexistence. The rhythm of attention extended beyond the walls into the streets, through doorways, across courtyards and fields. Presence, acknowledgement, and care intertwined with the unhurried patterns of life, forming a network of quiet awareness that permeated both space and time. And as shadows lengthened and evening deepened, the village's slow, deliberate cadence prepared the mind to notice subtler rhythms yet to come. The soft turning of seasons, the muted shifts in light, the delicate progression of evening toward night. In this unbroken attentiveness, the awareness of the court and the broader life of the village existed not as separate realities but as a single, seamless experience, ready to flow gently into the next layer of observation and reflection. As evening deepened, the village seemed to exhale into the surrounding landscape, the boundaries between human habitation and natural rhythm growing soft and indistinct. Light filtered gently through the trees at the edges of fields, casting elongated shadows that shifted imperceptibly with the lowering sun. The air carried the subtle scent of damp earth and ripening grain, merging with the faint warmth lingering from the day's sun. Every leaf, every blade of grass, and every stray feather rested in this delicate balance, moving only when stirred by the softest whisper of wind. The slow pulse of nature harmonized with the human presence, neither forcing attention nor drawing notice, existing in quiet accompaniment to daily life. Along the pathways and across the cobbled squares, animals moved with a languid grace, their steps careful, attentive, yet unhurried. Goats traced familiar routes, ears flicking at the subtle sound of distant movement. Dogs padded softly, pausing to observe shadows shifting across walls and floors. Cats, sleek and patient, traced ledges and windowsills, their eyes catching the faint glimmer of fading light. Each motion blended seamlessly into the rhythms of the village, becoming part of an overall awareness that stretched beyond the court or the streets and extended into the open fields and orchards that surrounded the settlement. Seasonal changes subtly announced themselves in the colors and textures of the landscape. Trees held leaves that glowed with warmth, reflecting golden light as autumn drew closer, or remained in deep, unwavering green during the height of summer. The air itself seemed to carry the memory of earlier seasons, cool hints of rain or the faint dryness of a prolonged sun, each breath of wind a gentle reminder of the gradual cycle of life. Streams shimmered quietly as they curved through meadows, carrying reflections of the sky in muted blues and soft silvers, and the sound of water added a calm undertone to the otherwise still day. The village and its court were woven into this seasonal rhythm. The actions of humans, the movements of animals, and even the flicker of candles within homes all unfolded in tandem with the gradual changes of light and atmosphere. Shadows stretched longer, contours softened, and details that had seemed distinct in bright sunlight now blurred gently into one another. The texture of stone, wood, and straw shifted in hue and depth, each surface catching the subtle shifts of light as the day moved toward night. Observers noticed these changes without effort, their attention floating in quiet alignment with the evolving environment. Even minor movements carried significance in this evening calm. The rustle of a bird taking flight from a distant tree, the subtle sway of a horse's mane in the breeze, the faint scuff of a goat's hoof against stone, all were absorbed into the larger awareness of place. The gentle sounds of domestic life, a door closing, a soft footstep, the distant clatter of a tool, merged seamlessly with the softer murmurs of nature, creating a continuous, meditative cadence. No single event commanded attention. Each contributed to the quiet pulse of life, each a soft note in the overarching harmony of the village and its surroundings. As darkness slowly approached, shadows deepened and light mellowed, spilling across walls and floors with a tender softness. Candles, flickering in homes and along narrow streets, cast warm pools of illumination, complementing the cooler, fading light outside. The animals responded subtly to the shift in atmosphere, adjusting positions, curling into familiar corners, stretching lazily across sun-warmed stones, or lingering along shaded pathways. Their presence, steady and calm, reinforced the gentle rhythm of the village and its court, providing continuity as the day quietly transitioned toward evening. The air carried with it the soft sounds of life beyond immediate sight, the murmur of distant trees, the faint call of a night bird, the whisper of wind across open fields. Each element contributed to the sense of temporal flow, of the day receding without urgency, and of the seasons moving gradually onward. Observers moved with awareness, yet without demand, their attention drawn to these subtle cues only as they naturally emerged. Even the smallest detail, a leaf tilting, a shadow lengthening, the shimmer of water in a stream, became a quiet participant in the overarching rhythm. The village, the court, and the surrounding landscape all shared in this slow unfolding. Moments of observation, gestures of care, and the simple habitual routines of humans and animals alike were harmonized with the gentle shifts of light and season. There was no pressure to mark time, no need to measure significance, only a collective attention that flowed quietly and continuously. In this blending of life and environment, the boundaries between observer and observed, between human and animal, between village and nature, softened into a seamless expanse of presence. Even as the final light of day waned, the village retained its soft awareness. Shadows merged into pools of muted darkness, the air cooled gently, and the textures of earth, stone, and vegetation took on the soft calm of evening. The animals settled in their habitual places, the court's echoes softened, and the village itself seemed to pause in unison, observing the fading day without hurry. Each subtle sound, each minor movement, became part of the quiet orchestration that carried the world slowly toward night, preparing both human and animal for rest, and creating a space where attention and calm coexisted naturally. From this peaceful perspective, the changing seasons and the evening's approach were not interruptions but continuations, extensions of the soft rhythms already established in the village and its court. Awareness flowed with the light, the air, and the movements of life, gently guiding the day toward its natural conclusion. In this manner, the environment itself became a quiet companion, a gentle framework for observation, care, and reflection, setting the stage for the final drifting into silence that awaited in the unfolding night. Night descended with a gentle hush, folding the village, the fields, and the court into a shared breath of quiet. Shadows merged into one another, soft and undisturbed, stretching along cobblestones, across rooftops, and over the edges of the river that meandered just beyond the village's reach. The last faint traces of sunlight, muted and distant, lingered on the tips of trees, reflecting a subtle warmth against the cool evening air. In these moments, movement slowed naturally, both human and animal adopting the calm cadence that night encouraged. Every step, every rustle, every soft murmur became part of the collective exhale, a slow rhythm shared across all beings and spaces. Within homes, the final domestic gestures unfolded without urgency. A broom rested against a wall after a quiet sweep, the flicker of candlelight glimmered across wooden beams, and the faint clinking of dishes settling into place echoed lightly in rooms where families prepared for rest. Windows, half open to invite the cool night air, framed a panorama of subtle shifts. The soft sway of branches, the quiet passage of small animals along familiar paths, and the gentle play of fading light on stone and plaster. Time itself seemed to slow, measured not in hours or minutes but in the gradual deepening of stillness across the village and surrounding lands. Outside, animals moved with the languid care of those accustomed to evening's embrace. Goats paused mid-step, ears attuned to distant whispers of the night wind, before continuing their slow circuit of familiar terrain. Horses, their muscles relaxed, shifted weight gently, settling into comfortable positions along stable walls. Cats wove softly through shadowed paths, tail and whiskers following the subtle cues of light and air. Each presence contributed to the overarching calm, an intricate dance of life in which awareness, observation, and motion harmonized without insistence or urgency. The air carried a subdued symphony of sounds. A distant owl's low call punctuated the quiet, merging seamlessly with the gentle sigh of the wind through fields and orchards. Leaves, stirred only intermittently, whispered soft patterns across stone and grass. Streams, their waters subdued in the dimming light, murmured quietly over rocks, reflecting the last hints of evening's warmth. Even the faintest movement, a rabbit slipping through brush, a bird perched silently on a high branch, felt deliberate, measured, and part of the steady cadence that enveloped all living things in this space. The court itself, once a center of minor observations and gentle rituals, now rested entirely within this shared quiet. The echoes of past proceedings seemed absorbed into the surrounding air, leaving only faint impressions of steps, the soft rustle of parchment, and the occasional flick of a tail. In these final hours before complete night, the boundaries between observer and observed dissolved further, as both humans and animals surrendered to the encompassing calm. Nothing demanded attention, and yet everything remained present, a subtle, steady awareness that neither intruded nor vanished. Along narrow streets and open squares, the final traces of human activity dissolved into evening shadows. Steps grew less frequent, doors closed with soft clicks, and the occasional whisper or sigh faded quickly. Animals, both within the court and beyond, adjusted naturally to the dimness, their motions slower, more deliberate, and in perfect rhythm with the world around them. The village, fields, and surrounding woods seemed to breathe as one, each element attuned to the gentle pacing of night, the soft cadence of fading light, and the gradual settling of life toward rest. Evening's light softened into a gentle gray, then into the quiet depth of twilight. Roofs, trees, and walls became silhouettes against the sky dimming toward dusk, while reflections in water mirrored the subtle transitions of color and shade. The wind carried only faint echoes of daytime warmth, and the village responded in kind, a collective exhale extending to the edges of fields and beyond. Presence lingered in small, delicate movements, a tail flick, a leaf's slow turn, the faintest scuff of a hoof, yet all blended into the overarching hush of night, each note contributing to a serene, continuous quiet. The natural world, too, followed this soft trajectory. Crickets began their low chorus, barely perceptible in the vastness of space, while the distant hum of insects blended into the wind's gentle murmur. Trees, heavy with the memory of day, swayed just enough to whisper subtle sounds across the village. Streams murmured, birds settled, and the cadence of life slowed to a rhythm as fluid as the air itself. There was no urgency, no attention demanded, only the slow, inevitable progress of night enveloping everything in its tranquil embrace. As darkness grew fuller, each sound, each movement, each breath became part of the larger awareness that held the village, the court, and the surrounding lands in gentle suspension. Even the smallest flicker of light from a distant candle, or the faintest shift of a tail, contributed to this continuous, meditative state. Observers, human and animal alike, moved without hurry, perceiving without disruption, as the environment itself guided attention toward repose. Every detail was present yet unobtrusive, part of a seamless, unbroken flow that led naturally toward complete quiet. By the time the sky darkened fully, only the softest shapes and outlines remained visible, and the world seemed to settle into a calm continuum. Shadows became deeper, textures softened, and the air grew cooler and stiller. Animals rested in habitual places, humans had concluded their routines, and the village itself lay folded into a collective hush, as though the very stones and trees had learned to exhale together. The court, the paths, the fields, and the surrounding woods were all part of the same gentle current, each pulse of awareness in harmony with the natural unfolding of night. In this final phase, drifting towards silence, the village, its inhabitants, and the broader environment shared in a seamless state of attention and release. Movement diminished, sounds softened, and the contours of life blended into shadows and muted textures. Presence persisted without insistence, offering a quiet companionship to all who remained awake even briefly, and allowing those who listened to drift effortlessly along with the natural cadence of the world. The slow, unbroken rhythm of night prepared the village, the animals, and the minds observing it to rest completely, carrying everything gently towards stillness. You don't need to keep listening anymore. The story can fade into the background now, becoming softer with every moment. If you're still awake, that's perfectly fine. There's no rush and nothing you need to remember. Just let your breathing slow down. Let your thoughts drift where they want to go. And allow the quiet of this night to settle around you. This story will remain here, gently playing while you rest. Tomorrow night, a new night will be waiting for you, and it's one you won't want to miss. And if sleep hasn't arrived just yet, you can quietly return to one of the previous nights, and let those stories guide you instead. For now, sleep well.